Hi everybody. In this video exercise, we will review another payroll problem. You've already had problems similar to this in the instructor video lectures for Chapter 9, so this should be a review for you. Let's look at the problem. Coastal Company has 3 employees that are paid monthly. FICA Social Security taxes are 6.2% on the first $127,300 paid to an employee, and that's wage basis can change. In this problem, it's given to you at $127,300. And FICA Medicare taxes of 1.45% on all gross pay. Coastal Company's FUTA taxes are 0.6%, and SUTA taxes are 4.5% in this problem on the first $7,000 paid to each employee for the year. And year-to-date salaries paid through October 31st are given to you, and salaries for the month of November are also given to you. So part number 1. Compute wages subject to Social Security tax, and wages subject to Medicare tax, and wages subject to FUTA and SUTA tax for each employee. Now, you need to remember that we're just paying the November salary. The gross pay through October 31st has already been paid to the employees, and all taxes on those wages has already been paid, so don't calculate any tax on these amounts. We're only concerned with the salary for the month of November. However, if an employee is bumping up against the $127,300 Social Security wage base or the $7,000 FUTA or SUTA wage base, then you need to consider how much gross salary they received before the current month's salary. Again, you've had problems like this before. Go ahead and fill out the wages subject to these taxes for each employee. Don't calculate the tax, just the wages subject to the tax. Get totals for each column, then start the video again to check your work. Okay, for John Snyder, if you look at the amount of gross wages paid to John Snyder before November, and then add the November wage, added together, he doesn't even come close to having a gross wage anywhere near the wage base for Social Security tax. So all of his November wages are subject to Social Security tax. Also, there's no limit on the amount of wages that are subject to Medicare tax, so the full $1,900 of November salary is also subject to Medicare tax. But FUTA and SUTA taxes, we have to be kind of careful for John Snyder, in that the wage base, the annual wage base per employee is $7,000. Tax for John Snyder has already been paid on $6,400, so he is bumping up against the wage base for FUTA and SUTA tax. The $7,000 wage base for FUTA and SUTA minus the $6,400 on which tax has already been fully paid means that only $600 is still subject to FUTA and SUTA tax for John Snyder for the rest of the calendar year. So $600 of wages for John Snyder are subject to FUTA and SUTA tax. Now let's take a look at Mary Davis. Again, for Mary, look at the gross wage already paid plus the November salary, not even close to the Social Security wage base. Therefore, all of Mary's $1,800 of salary paid to her in the month of November is subject to Social Security tax. And as I said before, there is no limit on the wages on which Medicare tax is paid, so the full $1,800 is subject to Medicare tax for Mary Davis. But take a look at the wages that she was paid before November 1st through October 31st. That's well in excess of the $7,000 wage base for FUTA and SUTA. So all FUTA and SUTA tax has already been paid on Mary Davis's salary for the entire calendar year, and none of her November wages are subject to FUTA and SUTA tax. Let's take a look at Jose Arturos. Jose had already been paid $124,500 before November. If you look at the amount of gross salary that he's scheduled to receive for the month of November, combined, they will exceed the $127,300 wage base given to you in this problem. So only part of the $11,500 of gross wage for the month of November for Jose is subject to Social Security tax. And the easiest way to calculate how much is subject to Social Security tax is to subtract from the $127,300 wage base the amount on which Social Security tax has already been fully paid for Jose, and that still leaves $2,800 still subject for the rest of the calendar year to Social Security tax for Jose Arturos. So $2,800 of Jose's November salary is subject to Social Security tax. Again, there is no limit on Medicare tax, so the full $11,500 of wages is subject to Medicare tax. And he had already exceeded the $7,000 wage base for FUTA and SUTA tax before he arrived at November salary. Therefore, none of his November salary is subject to FUTA and SUTA tax. Adding up the columns, we find that the company will have to pay Social Security tax on $6,500 for the month of November, Medicare tax on $15,200 for the month of November, and FUTA and SUTA tax on $600 of wages for the month of November. So Part 2 says, compute coastal payroll tax expense for the month of November. You can drop these wages subject to those taxes, the Social Security tax, $6,500, the Medicare tax, $15,200, the FUTA tax, $600, and the SUTA tax, $600. Just drop those amounts in, and then put in the tax rates, 6.2% for FICA, 1.45% for Medicare, 0.6% for FUTA, and 4.5% for SUTA. Again, this is a review. You have done problems like this before. Go ahead and calculate Coastal Company's payroll tax expense for the month of November. Wages subject to Social Security taxes are $6,500 times the 6.2% tax rate equals $403 of Social Security taxes. Wages subject to Medicare taxes were $15,200 times the 1.45% Medicare tax rate equals $220.40. Wages subject to FUTA tax, $600 at 0.6% is $3.60, and wages subject to SUTA tax, also $600 times 4.5% equals $27. Add it up, and you calculate $654 of payroll tax expense for Coastal Company for the month of November. Part 3 of this exercise asks you to write the journal entry to record these payroll taxes at November 30th and assume that the payroll taxes will be paid in December. So big hint, you've got payroll taxes payable. And in this textbook, they ask you to record the taxes in different liability accounts. So you'll have a Social Security liability account, a Medicare liability account, etc. So go ahead and write the journal entry to record November's payroll tax expense for the Coastal Company. If you've laid out your schedules well and done your work systematically, this journal entry will absolutely fall out of this piece of information here. Debit payroll tax expense, $654. Credit FICA taxes payable, $403. Credit FICA Medicare taxes payable, $220.40. Credit FUTA taxes payable, $3.60. And credit SUTA taxes payable, $27. Well, that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll finish up this exercise by calculating the net pay for each employee and also calculating the amount of tax to be withheld from each employee's gross salary, and writing the journal entry to record salaries payable. See you next time.